Welcome to the Power Factor Show. Episode 121. Sponsored by Rainier Ballistics, Hodgdon Powders, and JPL Precision.
Welcome to Power Factor. I'm Rick, and I'm flying solo tonight, and we're going to talk about IDPA and what's Rick doing for IDPA in 2013. Normally, I consider the shooting season to be kind of March through September. And usually every year I'll concentrate on a certain division or a certain gun. And this year I decided I'm going to concentrate on Enhanced Service Revolver. So I just want to kind of go over the preparations I'm making. Actually, the season's already started. I think I've shot 3 matches in Enhanced Service Revolver already. And I'm, I've got my gear together, and I just kind of wanted to go through the process that I go through to kind of get ready for the season, and we'll just go from there. Hopefully any of you are kind of interested in shooting a revolver, you'll see that even though it's kind of a specialty, I mean, I think most people who shoot revolver really are specialists, because you have all these different things that are much different from auto pistol. I mean, you can switch from one auto pistol to another, and the mags are going to be on your belt in the same place, and the mag release is in the same place and whatnot. But when you go into a revolver, everything changes, from the trigger action to your ammo, how you load, where it comes from, and everything. So I'm just going to kind of go through the process that I go through as really an auto pistol guy to get ready for shooting revolver. And so I'm shooting Enhanced Service Revolver in IDPA. There's 2 revolver divisions. They've introduced a new stock service revolver division in the last couple of years. And the distinction between the 2 divisions is Enhanced Service Revolver requires loading via moon clips. And this is a full moon clip, holds 6 rounds in a circle that you can just drop right into the chamber. Stock service revolver utilizes speed loaders, which is usually a kind of a mechanical device that clips the cartridges together. And once you've stuck the cartridges together and the rounds into the chambers, into the cylinder, that is, it releases the rounds. The plastic or metal speed loader device comes off, and the rounds are free then to fall and stay into the chamber. Whereas with the moon clip, the rounds remain attached to the clip while they're in use and while they're ejected. Also, there's a different power factor. Essentially, Enhanced Service Revolver is major, stock service revolver is minor, although it's actually sub-minor. They've introduced a lower power factor for stock service revolver than even minor, because in 4-inch revolvers, which is the maximum barrel length allowed in both ESR and SSR, in a 4-inch barrel, a lot of factory 38 special ammo, which is the popular cartridge for stock service revolver, a lot of that ammo was very marginal on power factor. And so rather than require people to load up to get to 125, they just lowered that down. But Enhanced Service Revolver hasn't changed. It's still a 4-inch barrel, still 165,000 power factor, which is bullet weight times velocity. So you get the 2 divisions that are separated mostly by this reloading difference, that it's been determined that the clip loading is enough of an advantage that it's distinct from the stock service revolver, which requires the speed loader loading. So I want to do a little background first. We already introduced the full moon clip, and you might look at it and think, why is that called a moon clip? Is it because it's round like the moon? No. It's based on the old Halfmoon Clip. Prior to World War I, before the U.S. entered World War I, U.S. arms makers were producing a lot of weapons for the British and the French and the Russians, and Smith & Wesson was selling numbers of their large frame swing-out cylinder revolvers to the British for their service use, the British and the Canadians. And this model was called the second model hand ejector, and it was chambered in the standard British service cartridge 455 that all their Webley revolvers were chambered in. And of course, then when the US got involved in World War I, we then suddenly had a huge increase in the need for weapons. And so a lot of this excess manufacturing capacity that had been used for making revolvers for the British and rifles for the Russians were turned to making weapons for the US military. And at the time, Colt and Springfield Armory had been making M1911 pistols for a number of years, but it became pretty clear that they were not going to be able to keep up with the demand. So a clever engineer at Smith & Wesson developed what was called the Halfmoon Clip. And the purpose of the Halfmoon Clip was to allow the rimless 45 ACP cartridge to be used in a revolver. Now, typically, a revolver extractor uses the rim of the cartridge to eject the cases out of the cylinder, but because of course an auto pistol uses a rimless case, in order to adapt the rimless 45 ACP cartridge to revolver use, this clever guy invented the Halfmoon Clip. And you can see why it's called a half moon. It's kind of a crescent shape, and it links 3 cartridges together. So to load your revolver, which has been adopted now by the US military as the model of 1917, made by both Colt and Smith & Wesson. The two guns were very different, but they just adopted them both as the model of 1917. You would open your cylinder and drop in 2 of these Halfmoon clips, and that would give you a full reload, and away you'd go. And so then, if you were equipped with one of these model of 1917 revolvers, on your pistol belt, you would have one of these clipped on there instead of a double mag pouch. And this is a quintuple, sextuple Halfmoon Clip pouch. And so it holds 6 Halfmoon clips, which would be 3 reloads for your revolver. And then after the war, Smith & Wesson continued to make large frame revolvers that didn't really require. They had a shelf, sort of like the chamber of an auto pistol, that would head space the rounds properly, but the ejector still wouldn't work unless you use the moon clips. And at some point, somebody decided, there's no reason for them to be loaded 3 at a time. You could design a clip that would load all 6 at once. And so even though the illusion to the moon kind of doesn't make any sense, if you take 2 Halfmoon clips and stick them together, it gives you a full moon clip. And it's just a really neat, if it were up to me, all of my revolvers would utilize full moon clips. They're just awesome. You can load all 6 rounds together. When you eject it, they're all sitting there on the ground, attached to each other. Because the moon clips are cheap, before you go to the match, you can load up 100 or more rounds, how many you're going to need, preload them into the clips, and then you don't have to do any loading, unloading, reloading. Just throw your old ones in the brass bag, get the fresh ones, put them on the belt. So that's the key to Enhanced Service Revolver, is the full moon clip loading. And really, they might as well call it the Smith & Wesson N-frame 45 ACP division, because that's what everybody shoots. It's really the only revolver that anybody shoots in Enhanced Service Revolver. There are moon clips available for 357 Magnum. I think I've seen moon clips in 40 Smith & Wesson 10mm. You can get them. You have to have your revolver specially modified to use them, unless it comes from the factory that way. But moon clip loaded 45 ACP revolvers have been around for 100 years now, and everybody's shooting the Smith & Wesson 45 ACP. Now, the maximum barrel length is 4 inches for revolvers, and you can have some issues with loading your rounds hot enough to make major power factor, that is the 165,000 power factor, from a 4-inch revolver. A 4-inch revolver is effectively about the same length as a 5-inch auto pistol barrel, because of course in an auto pistol the chamber is included in the barrel length, and in a revolver it's not. So the barrel length on a 4-inch revolver, including the cylinder, is about the same as on a 5-inch auto pistol. So the velocities are similar, but you've got some gas escaping through the flash gap on a revolver. And so you'll probably, even if you're loading 45 ACP already, you may have to bump your powder charge a little bit or change to a different powder to make power factor. I, for a while, was using Winchester WST powder, and I found that the same powder charge with a 200 grain bullet that made power factor in my 5-inch auto pistol. If I substituted a 230 grain bullet, I made power factor in my 4-inch revolver. And that was pretty nice, because if I had my press all set up for my powder charge, my overall length, everything stayed the same. All I had to do was just use a 230 grain bullet if I was loading for a revolver, or use a 200 grain bullet if I was loading for auto pistol, and that's the only change I had to make. So it was really handy in that sense. I've since gone to a faster burning powder. The charge weights aren't quite the same. I'm using 4.3 grains with a 200 grain bullet for my auto pistol loads, and I think I'm going to end up using a 4 grain load with a 230 grain bullet for revolver. My current load is utilizing a Rainier Ballistics 230 grain plated round nose and Federal primers, and that was really the key to my ability to shoot Enhanced Service Revolver this year. Is my revolver, using really pretty much any primer I've tried in it, is only about 90% reliable in terms of igniting the rounds, unless I use Federals, in which case it has been 100%. So I was able to secure 1,000 Federal primers a couple of weeks ago, and that was pretty much what allowed me to say, okay, I'm going to be able to shoot at least through the end of August. The number of matches I'm planning to shoot, I'll be able to get through the end of August with good reliable ignition, because I have 1,000 of these Federal primers. And if you're shooting a revolver, I think you're probably already loading Federal. They're the softest primer cup. And if you've got your revolver tuned at all to lighten the trigger pull, lightening the hammer fall, you're probably already using the Federal primers. I don't need, there's no other special preparations. The Moon clips are available from a number of sources, in plain steel, stainless steel, and there's even some plastic ones out there. And some rounds have slightly different dimensions on the extractor groove, and they clip into the clip at the extractor groove, and so some are easier to get on, easier to get off. The ones that are fit looser, that are easy to fit on the clip, will flop around a little more once they're on the clip. And so that's one of the reasons to stick to round nose bullets. It really helps on your reloads. The round nose bullets help funnel them into the chambers, and so even if you've got a little bit of play here in the clip because of the smaller extractor groove, that the rounds should just rattle right in as long as you use the round nose bullets. If they're tight getting into the clip, I would just throw them into the brass bucket and use them for auto pistol use. I don't see any reason to fight with them. But we'll get into a little more details of the ammo. The other equipment that you need, of course, is a good gun and a good holster. The gun I've been using the last few years, which is, I think I featured it on the episode in which we talked about revolvers and competition. It's a Smith & Wesson Model 22. This was introduced, I think it's 6 or 8 years ago now. It's the regular N frame, large frame, with a skinny 4-inch barrel, fixed sights. That's something that will come into play when you're trying to choose your load. If you've got fixed sights, most revolvers today, a lot of the guns that you'll see in Enhanced Service Revolver are the Smith & Wesson 625, and they all have adjustable sights. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. You can just adjust your sights for your load. On this gun, I bought the gun, fired some rounds through it with my chosen load that I knew made power factor, and the sights were way off. I mean, that's one of the things about fixed sights, is if you're messing around at all with different bullet weights, it's very, I don't want to say very unlikely, but it's very possible that the gun is not going to hit your point of aim at the distances at which you need it to. IDPA competition is mostly a close-up game. We're usually shooting at an 8-inch target, usually no smaller than a 6-inch target, which is the size of the head on the IDPA target. So you don't, if you're off for elevation by an inch or so, out to 20 yards, 25 yards, that's probably not going to be a huge issue. But on a fixed sight gun, if you're shooting it in competition, you've got a favorite competition load, there's no reason why you can't get it point of aim, point of impact coinciding at a usable distance. When I bought this gun, it shot about a foot low at 25 yards, and that's way too much. I mean, you can't be dealing with that kind of difference, because you are going to be aiming at 6-inch targets out as far as 25 yards. So you probably want to get it to within an inch. we shot the sighting in your gun episode and discussed how to sight in a fixed sight gun. This gun does have a replaceable front sight. It's pinned into a sight base on the barrel, so it's possible to drive that pin out, put on sights of different heights to suit your elevation needs. This sight I ended up knocking off about 25% of its original stock height to get it on target at 25 yards, but now it's dead on with my chosen load, and I don't expect I'm going to be changing from a 230 grain bullet at 740 feet per second. So although it was kind of a hassle to get out there with a file and whatnot to get it on target, once it's on target, you're good to go. So this gun has had the what they call the factory action job. I had to send it back to Smith & Wesson for some warranty service, and while it was there, I said, okay, go ahead and do the action job on it. I'll admit to not really noticing a huge difference. The stock gun versus the gun with the trigger job, really not a whole lot of difference. I probably had, if I had it to do again, I probably wouldn't do it. The factory action job is $125. Didn't really reduce the pull weight a lot. That's really what I was hoping for. I mean, I think most people, when they have a double action revolver and they have an action job, they want the trigger pull weight to go down from 10 pounds to 8 pounds or something like that. On this, not much difference at all. So the one good thing that does come from that is they do chamfer the chamber openings at the back end of the cylinder. Each of the 6 chambers, they do kind of a beveling around the edges that helps rattle in the rounds when you're doing your reloads, and that part of it is valuable. It's certainly not worth $125. So if you're getting an action job done, these are primerless dud. I'm just playing around with them here. You look for somebody to do your action job that's got some experience, that understands what you're trying to do. One of the popular things to do to reduce the pull weight on a Smith & Wesson revolver is to unscrew what's called the strain screw. It's a little screw in the front of the frame that bears on the mainspring, and you can turn it out a little bit and it will lighten up the trigger, but of course the act of lightening up the trigger is also lightening the hammer fall. And like I said, on this gun, in its stock shape, when I bought it, it only ignited about 90% of the rounds I put through it. And now with the action job, it still only ignites about 90%. But since going to the federal primers, it's been at 100%. So I'm not too concerned with that. But if you're going to have an action job done, have it done by somebody that understands the balancing act of the weight of the hammer, the strength of the mainspring, the return spring on the trigger. You can lighten up the pull by messing around with the return spring, but then you get kind of a mushy return on it, and you want a certain balance. You don't want a dramatically different sense of how hard it is to pull the trigger, and then the sensation of the trigger following your finger back as you release it. You want a certain sense of balance in that front and rear action and make the gun easier to shoot. It does make it a lot easier to shoot. Again, as kind of an auto pistol guy, it took me a while to kind of understand some of these features of shooting the revolver, especially trying to shoot it with speed and accuracy. I'm pretty accurate, not very fast. We'll get into that. But other gear you're going to need to shoot, you want a good holster. One of the things in one of the very early episodes Steve and I discussed when we were talking about equipment is you need a holster that is suitable for competition, and the rules have certain minimum requirements. The trigger guard has to be covered. Got that in spades here. The holster can have no offset that sets it away from the belt. We're all set there. But one of the problems with this is it's kind of a squishy, even though it's a solidly put together leather holster. You can see that once the gun is taken out of it, it's kind of free to collapse. And one of the problems, or really the major problem with that, is when you're competing or even when you're practicing, is trying to get the gun back into the holster. Of course, now I'm trying to demonstrate and it goes right in. But you can see how the cylinder kind of hangs up on the edge of the holster there. And one of the things that causes is this tendency to have to reach around with your weak hand to kind of help the gun into the holster. And you can end up sweeping yourself. Safety officers get kind of worried when they see you doing that. So even though this was a good serviceable holster that I used for a number of years, I've since replaced it with a really nice new one. If you saw the Safariland equipment episode, when Steve and I were reviewing Safariland holsters, I reviewed the model 567, which is a synthetic holster. It's not Kydex. It's kind of a firm but flexible plastic. And this is the model 568. It's essentially the same holster. The pouch is the same. My understanding is the 567 is equipped with the standard belt loop panel here in the back, and the 568 has a paddle attachment in the back. But at least some models, it looks like the 567 has been discontinued and replaced with the 568, which comes with both the paddle attachment and the belt loop attachment. So if you're looking for this holster, and again, I highly recommend it. It's a great value. Fireland knows their stuff. It's durable. I've been using one of the same model with my high power, and highly recommend it. Inexpensive, $45 I think at full retail, and it's got a lot of adjustments on it. Now, some of these holsters, they call this a custom fit holster. As we went into in the other episode, the reason they call it custom fit is because they've got models that can be adjusted to fit 3 or 4 different guns. The 567 that I bought intending to put my high power in it can also be adjusted to fit, they say, the Beretta 92, the 1911. This one seems to be pretty much single purpose. I mean, I don't know what else you'd get in here other than an end frame, 4-inch end frame Smith & Wesson, but it still has the adjustments. You've got 3 tensioning screws here on the side that you can adjust to kind of adjust this clamping action this way. It's wrapped around the front and then attached with the screws at the back. And then you've also got this screw that impinges on the bottom of the ejector rod housing. So you actually have 4 ways to adjust the fit. And I've got it set up, as you can see, because of the stiffness of the material, there's no problem drawing and then reholstering. It stays open when the gun's out. It's perfectly straight drop. It's just about as low as it can possibly ride on the belt and still be IDPA legal. So I think it's a really good holster. I really like it. I've got adjusted so there's almost no fore and aft movement, almost no twisting movement, and I've got most of the tension on this bottom screw, so that once the gun has been lifted about 1/2 inch, almost all the tension goes away. So it's secure when it's all the way in the holster, but after about 1/2 inch of movement, it's free to come out. So I think this is a great rig. I've got it matched with the Fireland belt, and I've only used this for about 3 matches now, but I'm very happy with it. So check it out if you're looking for a revolver holster. Just be mindful of the different features, how low it can ride, how far out it can ride, and then the retention abilities, and then also you want something, again, if you get a leather holster, make sure it's something that's got some kind of reinforcement at the mouth that holds it open. But these synthetic holsters are nice because they hold their shape, and it's just as easy to get the gun back in as to get it out. Other equipment you need are going to be moon clip holders. I've been using these Shoot the Moon or Shoot a Moon clip holders since day one. They're inexpensive. They're easy to get. They come 2 in a package. The rules are very specifically written in a way that allow this clip holder to be used. I might even think that they were written specifically for this clip holder because they are so popular. The one issue that you might run into is the rule book requires that the holder is essentially above the top of the cartridges when they're in the holder. I mean, look for the exact language, but essentially the holster has to be taller than the rounds loaded in the moon clip. Now, what I did on this one is I just got out a pocket knife and did a little trimming, and that allows the cartridges to ride low enough in the clip that this central white plastic plug actually is above the top level of the case rims, and that's perfectly legal. What you'll also find people do is because there's a central hole in the middle of this plastic plug that's conveniently about the size of some calibers of bullet, if you just stick a bullet in that hole, it rises above the top of the plastic plug, and then again, you've now got an element of the clip holder that is above the top of the cartridge. And I've also seen people just take a round-headed bolt and screw it in there, just something to make sure that some part of the holder is riding higher than the clipped cartridges, and it's easy workaround. But just be aware of that rule, that if you're going to use the Halfmoon clip holders, that you have to make some small modification to them or adaptation to make them legal. But I've been using these for years and they work great. So now you've got all your rounds clipped on this holder. So how do you get them off of there? And for years I would struggle with these things, and then I saw this clever thing. This is actually a homemade version of a commercially available product, and it's a DMooner. And it's just a piece of brass tubing. I think it's 5/8 inch brass tubing. Took the Dremel with a little cutoff wheel to it. We'll get it, I'm sure by now you'll see a close-up picture of it on the screen. And you just stick it over the cartridge, and the little lip on the edge of it bears against the edge of the clip, and you just rotate it and it comes right off. And I've made it long enough so that it will hold 6 loaded rounds. And most of the time I just hold it over my brass bag and let them fall out the bottom. If your brass bag isn't handy, if you make it 6 cartridges long, you can unload one clip, dump it into your bag, come back and unload another clip, dump it into the bag. But it just is easy on your fingertips to have this little DMooner. And I think I made 2 of these for like $2. So you can buy them, you know, you can order them or just easily make it. But I highly recommend you get one, because trying to deal with the clip, trying to get the unloaded rounds or loaded rounds off of the clip is kind of a pain in the rear. Now the clips themselves, you have to be careful with them. They're pretty rugged, but if you damage the clip, what you're likely to do is bend one of these little arms. I mean, they have 6 arms that protrude out, or fingers that clip onto the rims of the cases. And if you bend those in the sense that it's flat like this, if you bend them in this dimension, what that does is, because it is kind of a springy material, I mean, it has to be somewhat springy to allow the cartridges to snap in and come out. If you bend it up this way, then that springiness works against you in 2 ways. One, the rim will be probably rubbing against the inside of the frame as the cylinder turns, but also that bend in the clip will cushion the blow of the hammer to the extent that the rounds won't fire. So you need to check the flatness of your Moon clips. I would do it before every match. What I generally do is find just some kind of a dowel or something cylindrical that's about the same diameter as the inside of the clip, and just take all of your empty clips and stack them up. I've probably got 40 of them. So just stack them all up and then just look, and if you see any daylight between them, just pull out one out and throw it away. I mean, if you can fiddle with it, you can try to bend it, but they're inexpensive. You know, if you've got lots of them, they're cheap. Buy lots of them. If you've got a bent one, just chuck it. Don't worry about it. But check them regularly, because that bent clip will really screw you up. You'll see both to check for bent clips and to check for high primers. You'll see people load the revolver, close the cylinder, and then thumb the hammer back just enough to allow the cylinder to freewheel, and they'll spin it around. And if they feel any drag, then they know they've either got a high primer or a bent clip that's holding the case rim against the back of the frame. And so if you've got that drag, that obviously is going to adversely affect your trigger pull. As you're pulling that trigger, you're spinning the cylinder around, and any drag is going to slow it down, make it heavier. It's going to feel different than every other clip. So all of your practice is, you know, kind of out the window if you've got a dramatically different pull because of the adverse effects of the bent clip or a high primer. And that's another thing we talked about in the hand loading episode, is those primers should be seated slightly below flush with the case head to ensure that you don't have a primer rubbing on the frame as it spins around. So as you're doing your hand loading, or even if it's factory ammo for that matter, take a look. I'll take a whole box of 50 cartridges and look across the rims to see if any of them are cocked or riding too high. Pull out the ones that are too high or reseat them, but get rid of those as they might be dragging inside the cylinder and screw up your trigger pull. So check those clips, check the primers. You might also want to just look for defects in the rims. I haven't seen too many problems with a burr, you know, that would stick up high enough that you'd have an issue with it. But if the rims get too beat up, it could be an issue, so check that as well. Now the rules involving how you wear your gear is another thing to consider. The auto pistol divisions, you've got your gun on your strong hip, and your reloads are going to be behind the hip on your weak side, where you can grab them with your weak hand to do your reloads. With the revolver, the rules are very different, although the location of the revolver on the strong side is the same, mounted on a belt that passes through the belt loops, the breech face no lower than halfway down the width of the belt, the trigger centered on the body center line, and then you're allowed 2 reloads in front of the holster. So your typical revolver reload, you're get the cylinder open, you're doing your ejecting with the gun in your weak hand, and then going for your reload with a strong hand. And that's why the rules allow the reloads to be on the strong side, because that's the standard revolver reload, is to be going for the reloads with your strong hand. Now, depending on how big your waist is and how you've got your gear located, a concern is that you've got to maintain your concealment even as you're trying to get your gear situated for best advantageous reloading. So here's my my setup for my holster, and then I'm allowed 2 reloads. The first can be no more than 1 inch from the holster. So let's say I've got it, we'll call that 1 inch from the holster. Then my second reload can be 1 inch from my first. And by the time I've got those 2 things stuck on my belt, as you can see, this front reload looks to me like it's about 3 inches away from the front of the holster. And if you've got a fairly small waist, 30 inches, 32 inches, this is going to start sticking out to the extent that your cover garment, unless it's pretty much closed at the front, isn't going to cover this. And I haven't had to worry about a 32-inch waist for about 20 years now. So it's not really a concern for me, but I can just about get away with putting the holster as far forward as possible, that is with the trigger, the center of the trigger pad on the body center line, spacing these 2 reloads 1 inch apart, and as long as my cover garment hangs pretty much straight down and doesn't, come out around my massive chest, as long as it hangs straight down, I'm pretty well covered. You have to kind of do the helicopter deal if you're asked to do an equipment check. Arms straight out. As long as your garment drapes straight down, it'll probably cover these. But depending on your body size and type, you may have to push the holster back 1 inch or so. You can crowd these clip holders a little bit closer together than 1 inch apart if necessary, but just work on that to make sure that it's a consistent location so that the reloads are there when you're looking for them, but then also that they're legal and that they're covered by the garment if you have to do an equipment check. The other thing is how do you do your reloads? I've explained that many times that I'm a lefty. There are lots of helpful videos. If you've ever taken an NRA basic pistol class, they instruct you on how to do a standard reload. I'm not going to get too much into it. Just for myself, since this is an episode about me, I'll tell you that I am trying this year to get away from what's kind of the standard revolver reload for a lefty, where you push the cylinder through with your thumb and activate the ejector with your index finger. I'm trying to do a little more of a Matt Griffin style reload, where I grab the frame this way and then use essentially the palm of my hand to punch the cylinder out, and then I'm using my social finger, I think it's called, on the ejector. So it's just a little bit different. It allows me, my reload used to be kind of like this, and then I drop it straight down to put it near the belt to get the reload in it. And now I'm doing everything more kind of out here in front a little bit, getting it open like this and getting the reload up like this. So keeping it up a little higher, more like an auto pistol reload. But it's it's just something that I'm working on. I decided, since I'm not a revolver specialist and I just kind of wanted a little something to work on, I decided that changing my reload was just kind of the thing that I'd spend the summer working on. And I'm a little bit better at it. I'm just kind of working on my index, trying to get my index finger here to make sure right up between the barrel and the ejector rod housing, so that when I do push the cylinder open, that then puts my social finger right in line with the ejector rod. So that's been working pretty well. If you're a righty, of course, you've got a completely different setup. I've seen people push the cylinder open with their index finger and do the reload like this. There's different techniques, so just pick one and practice it. I mean, a lot of the stuff I see people introducing new techniques, I sometimes think, I don't really see much of an advantage to that. If you practice something that's conventional, you'll probably be better off than not practicing some fancy new technique. So pick a technique, practice it, and get good at it. And I think that's the best you can do, especially like me. If you're going to specialize in revolver for 3 months, you're not going to master it, but so it's probably a good idea just to pick something that you can do that seems kind of intuitive, that doesn't require a lot of thinking. I mean, I've practiced my revolver reloads so little over the course of my life that even though I've been practicing this one now for 2 months, it's almost become second nature. It used to be I had to kind of mentally remind myself, okay, now don't stick your thumb through the frame, because that'll screw up your technique. Be sure you use the palm of your hand to get that cylinder open. And just in a few hours of practicing over the last couple of months, I've already pretty much managed to make this now my go-to reload, and I don't have to be thinking too much about it. So practice one, become good at it, and that will probably be the best one, rather than practicing some trick reload that's supposed to save you a fraction of a second. You'll be much better if you're just consistently good at the one that you do. Other considerations, I mentioned ammo. Not only make sure you've got a good load, that you've got good clips that are flat, but one of the really nice things that I find as a auto pistol shooter who normally is trying to police up 3 or 4 or 5 magazines after every stage, cleaning them to get ready for the next stage. If you're shooting a revolver with moon clips, buy enough moon clips that you've got a match's worth of ammo already loaded up. It makes it really nice to not have to be at the range on match day dealing with trying to demoon your ammo, and so I'll just load up 100 rounds into the clips, put them in my range bag, and then at the end of a stage all I have to do is throw the empties in the brass bag, put the fresh ones in the pouches, and I'm ready to go. And that's really, that's the way to go. The other thing is IDPA now, of course, allows a third reload for revolver shooters. It has to be behind the body center line or in a pocket or something. You can't line up 3 in a row on the front of the holster. So most people, I think, who are using a third clip holder are putting it behind the body center line on the right side. I don't see any reason why you couldn't put it behind the holster on your strong hand side. What I do with it is I just put it in the pocket of the concealment garment that's on the same side as the holster. And as I've mentioned in other episodes when we're talking about the draw, if you've got some weight in the front of the pocket on the holster side, as you sweep the garment away, the weight of what you have in the pocket helps carry the garment around and get it out of your way. And since you're reloading with your strong hand anyway, I just drop that third clip in the pocket on the front side on my strong side. So it's acting as a weight, to help my draw every time I'm drawing. But then if I need that third clip, it's there. And it's very possible that you'll need a third clip. I mean, the maximum minimum round count on a course of fire is going to be 18 rounds. So if you've got 6 in the gun, 12 on the belt, there's your 18. If you have to take an extra shot, make up a mic, you've got a nasty steel target that takes a few rounds to get down, and you need that reload, it's going to come in. I mean, you're going to shoot a lot of, I see videos from a lot of sanctioned matches, and a lot of them are full of 18-round stages. So especially at the sanctioned match level, if you're going to be shooting a revolver, have that third reload and be accustomed to where you're going to find it. I put it in the pocket because that's just handy for me. But if you want to put it someplace on the belt, it's perfectly legal. But unlike the unlike the auto pistol divisions in which you're allowed to use 2 reloads, revolvers are allowed up to 3 reloads. So give some thought to where that 3rd reload's going to go. Other than that, my range bag is set up pretty much the way it always is. I have a box. This is my ammo box. It perfectly fits in my range bag, and I can easily get 100 loaded rounds in it. I'm sure you can see all of them in there. And so whenever I'm shooting revolver, I can load up all my rounds, put them in the box, and then when it's time to shoot revolver, go into the match to shoot revolver, I just put the whole box in the range bag, and then I've got them right there, and it works great. So plan ahead. I've seen these what look almost like a tackle box or a tool box that has little pins that stick up to allow you to drop moon clips on it. That works fine. Just something that provides safe, secure storage so that you're not dumping them all out on the ground. And load up enough that you don't have to mess with them at the match. There's always time afterward to demoon. That's about it. That's about it. I think if you're not a revolver specialist, if you're going to just kind of dabble in revolvers the way I do, pick some basic techniques. The other thing too is your grip. I don't want to get too much into it. It was kind of interesting that we got a lot of feedback when we were talking about revolver grips. Because I'm not a revolver specialist and I don't want to completely reconfigure my grip for revolver use, I try to hold my revolver kind of in the same way that I hold an auto pistol. And you can either do that or not, depending on what you're used to and what technique you normally use. The auto pistol grip, I like to have the strong hand riding on top of the weak thumb up high on the frame. And I can't really do that too readily on the revolver. There's no, I've seen people with smaller hands kind of ride their hands down on the frame more like this. And that just feels like the gun is not down, nestled into my grip. It feels like it's kind of riding on top of my hands. And a lot of that just has to do with how high the bore line is above the frame. On an auto pistol, it's quite a bit lower. And so the gun is already very high in your grip. And I'm trying to diminish that effect by getting my hand up as high as I can. And so I've got my strong hand riding high enough that the hammer is actually going to come back and hit this in double action. And then I actually have both of my thumbs riding up on the recoil shield. And so I've had people ask me, aren't you opening up your grip and weakening your grip? And what I'm actually doing by getting my thumbs up is opening the frame so I've got a place to put my weak hand. If you're holding the revolver like this, you're going to be getting probably 90% of your grip strength from your strong hand because there's no place on the frame to put your weak hand. I mean, this is all I have. This is the only contact area I have on the frame for my weak hand. It's this postage stamp size piece here in the lower corner where it really isn't doing me much good. By getting my hand up here open and as high on the frame as possible, now I've got this whole part of the frame available for my weak hand. And actually my thumbs are just kind of along for the ride, which is pretty much the same with my auto pistol grip too. I could probably shoot just as effectively holding the gun like this as holding it like this, because all of my gripping strength is coming essentially from clamping my two hands together on the frame. They meet kind of in the middle at the back. It's not really an overlapping grip where my strong hand is really dominating. I open it up like this, I've got a lot more room. And the grip strength again is from the fingers and the palms and the thumbs. I'm just trying to keep them out of the way. I'm resting them against the back of the recoil shield, but not so heavily that they can drag on the rims, because of course the cylinder is turning right under my thumbs here, so I'm trying not to adversely affect the rotation of the cylinder. But again, you know, just depending on what you're trying to do, adapt your grip. If you're an auto pistol guy or gal, you know, you might want to look at a grip like this where you've got your strong hand over your weak thumb. But again, you don't want to get your thumbs out here in front of the flash gap. I've heard some interesting stories about shooting high pressure revolvers, 44 Magnums and whatnot. You get your thumb out here, you'll blow the end of your thumb off. So if you've got smaller hands and can get your grip down comfortably like this, this really mimics an auto pistol grip really well. But again, I just like to get it up as high as I can, and so I've got my thumbs up like this, and that's just the way I do it. You can check into your trigger techniques. Some people like to bring the trigger back until it's almost ready to drop the hammer, which is, most people call that staging the hammer. Bring it back and then pull that last little bit to drop the hammer, almost like a long pre-travel with a single action break at the end. I tend to be a fan of the smooth, pull it all the way through and then release it at about the same speed that I'm pulling it. This kind of balance of pulling the trigger and releasing the trigger I spoke about a little bit earlier in the context of the weight of the spring action, the amount of spring that you have to overcome to fire the shot, and then the amount of spring pressure that's pushing the trigger back in the reset. I also like to keep my trigger pull consistent in terms of the time it takes me to break the shot and the time it takes me to release the shot. Keeping that balance makes it a lot easier for me to stay on target. If you try to snap it back and then release it slowly, you know, you're going to get this kind of a weird motion in the gun. And so I find that I have long fingers. I hit the trigger in double action almost back here at the second joint, and that allows me to pull the trigger straight back. If it's not coming straight back, you're going to be pushing the muzzle off one way or the other, and because of that long trigger pull, you've got a lot more distance of trigger travel that you need to hold the gun steady. So work on your trigger control to the extent that your trigger location, your finger location on the trigger that is, isn't pushing the barrel or pulling the barrel. And depending on your left-handed or right-handed, getting too deep into the trigger will push the barrel one way, not deep enough, will push it the other way. And just work on that. I know that for my revolver shooting, I'm plenty accurate as long as I don't rush. Things kind of fall apart if I'm shooting at a swinger, a drop turn, or something where I feel like I've got to break the shot right now. My technique kind of falls apart, and that's one of the reasons I'm started in March working on these techniques, kind of building up. My goal is to feel like I know what I'm doing by the time the August Washington State Championship match comes up. So I've got a few months to work on it and just work on those techniques. And again, you know, if there's a famous revolver shooter whose techniques you want to emulate because they're really good, that's why they're famous, not a bad idea. You know, I think largely because I'm a lefty and I have other considerations, I've, you know, kind of gone my own way in that respect. But do what works, have fun, be safe, and shoot more revolver. So next week, I'm sure we're going to have another exciting episode that's going to, I'm sure, overshadow this one. But if you've had a good time and you have any questions, comments, you can go ahead and see me or talk to me at the website, powerfactorshow.com. You can send us an email, powerfactorshow@gmail.com. Or if I just kind of glance off to the side at the whiteboard, I can see that facebook.com/powerfactorshow is where you'll find us on Facebook. So until next time, I'm Rick. We'll see you later. Have fun.